take it away.
Thank you, Ann, and welcome everyone. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us here today. This is an interesting webinar. I think our attendance numbers show us that speech continues to be something of interest, and I think it's obvious why more and more apps are being speech-driven. You're just exposed to it more and more, and of course, the technology has gotten better and better as well. So we're going to talk about speech from a commercial standpoint, not so much from a Siri and Alexa kind of standpoint, but from an actual during the day at work. So why should we be talking about speech? Well, we can claim this fairly legitimately. We've had speech applications in the market for over 20 years. We're definitely one of the pioneers in a user speech interface as well as a speech automated attendant. And while we did start small in, as a company that mostly catered to branch offices and smaller businesses, we've grown over the years, and we now tend to be, one of the prime enterprise unified communication suppliers, which gives us lots of customers to talk to. And what we look at as we're spending our research and development budget is, what is it that we need to do in this market to make our product of more use to the consumers? And we focus in three areas: individual workers, teams, and the core business piece of it as well. Individual workers, of course, we will talk about the speech user interface. And businesses we'll be talking about because we'll be talking about the speech automated attendant. The teams piece right now doesn't have much speech in it yet, so we won't really be talking too much about that, although we have lots of webinars about TeamQ and our collaboration tools. So if you look at our platform here, over the years we've sort of broken it into these categories. Interoperability we consider kind of the right to play. And the right to play means if we don't connect to your environment, then we really shouldn't be in there talking to you. And so we work really hard on being able to connect to whatever it is you have out there. And then we have the core voice piece. We'll talk about part of that, the speech automated attendant. We have the mobility tools, and that's where we put the speech-enabled user interface as well. And of course, we have the custom development tools. Today, we're just going to focus on the speech piece. From a connectivity point of view, if you're looking at our product, it's kind of good to know two things here. The first thing is, I'm guessing we connect to whatever it is you have in your environment today. And I say that because I'm not really aware of anything with which we can't connect. So regardless of your PBX, your groupware package, your network architecture, whatever you're doing, our products would work today. And the second important piece is, going forward, you can count on being able to move our solution forward as you change things in your environment. If you look at upgrading from Exchange to Office 365 or to Gmail, or even to a different on-site version of maybe you have an older IBM system, you're going to move it to Exchange. Our product moves right along with it. The same kind of functionality goes. And then the same, of course, for your control piece, your PBX. Regardless of what you're using today, whatever direction you go in, you'll be able to pull all of these solutions forward. And I think that's important when you look at spending money for UC applications. The two big things I think you need to look at is, will your users actually use them, so you're getting your money's worth? And as you move forward, is something you're purchasing today limiting you in terms of how you can move forward? And we're very comfortable in both of those categories, and I think you'll see why as we go through the presentation. So, voice is the way we learn to communicate first. From our earliest days, we struggle actually when we get to school to having to learn to write and things like that because voice is so easy. It's very easy. After just a few years, human beings can, communicate great amounts of information and nuances of information where, there's just no better way to do that. Now, that is not always the case when you're using your voice with a technical system. There's a lot of work to be done to make an application that sort of works like talking to a person. This is what we face when we design these applications. Due to all the speech kind of things in movies, what we see is this feeling that to have a speech-driven application is just like talking to a human being. And that's just not the case. It kind of seems like that at the surface, but the tolerance in conversation with humans is amazing. Most of you sitting where you are today, as an example, if you stop right now and listen, you'll hear background noise. You'll hear the air conditioning in your building or a fan or your computer. But you didn't hear that until I brought it up to your attention, because as a human, we do things with our ears to make all this work better. As a machine, you don't get that benefit. You can cut some of that noise out, but you have to be a little better when you write a voice application. So we're going to look at not only what it is we do, but along the way, we're going to talk about how we've designed our grammars, the number of years we've had designing this interface. Because if you're looking at our solution versus someone else's solution, we really have an edge in the fact that we've been doing it longer than anyone. So one of the things I think we talk about is when we look at speech, and this chart, this concept at least, has been with us for years as we've been kind of a pioneer in getting speech into the industry. We believe now the time has come, both the competency of the technology and the exposure that you have. And we're very comfortable talking about productivity gains and cost savings when we look at these solutions. And we'll point these out as we go along. And one of the big things is the reduction in transaction latency. So much of what we do is about communications in the sense of making it work better and faster. And this is definitely one of those pieces. And then we'll talk about operational hours extensions. One of the things, I have conversations all the time with people that say, I like that speech automated attendant, but I'm not really ready to have that be the front of my business right now. And that's okay, and we understand that. But just the fact that you could deploy it internally, because about a third of the calls that go to your attendants are internal people, and that could be serviced by an on-site speech automated attendant. And then after hours, when it's not a case of whether a human being is going to answer, it's a case of whether anyone's going to answer. So we're going to talk about different ways to use this that can fit into the different kind of environments that our potential customers have. So don't have to talk that much about speech anymore. It was quite, in the early, maybe 10 years ago, it was quite complex to take somebody through the concept of how speech would work, because many people, back then probably most people, had never used a speech-driven application. But now with all the call centers you call in the airlines and the banks and everyone, almost everyone's been through one of those at a commercial level. And then of course most of us now are carrying speech-driven devices with it. Most of our mobile phones are speech. Sitting in our houses, we have things like Alexa, that's going and getting recipes for us while we're cooking, and all that speech usage has given us a much greater comfort for it. It hasn't really made us better users, and we'll talk about that. And a little understanding in how this works goes a long way. And the desktop applications we see out there basically helped quite a bit. But I have to say, for most people, speech is something they go through using on a fairly regular basis. Now, in our area, we're going to talk about 3 different areas where we use speech. And the first 2 are actually sort of part of the same process. But we're going to look at automated attendant and how we do that. We're going to look at the outside caller interface. And that is after you've used automated attendant and the call comes back. Let's say you transfer to somebody, you leave a message, you stay on the line and the call comes back. We have a speech interface for that, whereas all of our competition would switch back to DTMF. We try and make it a seamless process. So we'll look at how we do that piece as well, and then we'll spend some time with the user interface, which is just probably the best gift you can give to a mobile worker in terms of productivity and being able to meet their customers' needs. So let's start with the automated attendant. This is a fairly easy one to understand at the surface, but there's a lot of subtlety here when you go to purchase one of these and implement them in trying to understand, how do I make this work so my calling public feels like they're being serviced better, not like we've tried to reduce costs and sent them to a machine. And a lot of that has to do with the design of the system, and a good part of it as well with the implementation. So we've always had an automated attendant module on our system, almost the very beginning. It's been touch tone driven, and because this product that we're selling you today is the same one we started with, just with a lot of hours of work having gone into it, it is the most feature-rich automated attendant product out there. And while a lot of people don't necessarily look at automated attendant features when they upgrade their platform, a lot of people find out during the process they're using quite a few things in that automated attendant. So what we did years ago when we rolled the 2 companies together that ended up making AVST was we took the speech technology from one and brought it into the automated attendant from the other product. And that left us with that same powerful automated attendant, but now it's speech-driven. And it's not just a speech directory like the competition has, where you can say somebody's name and transfer. Everything's speech-driven. And that's a much more seamless experience for the callers. And as you start looking at doing these, a lot of people say, well, it's pretty easy. You just recognize a name, and then you transfer to someone. But it is much more complex than that. And there's a number of things you have to look at. One of the things you have to look at is, depending on how your system's deployed, you might have a need for departmental applications, where when I call, I have a CXE system that's supporting, a company that has locations in 5 states. And when they call in, and they call into the speech attendant in Chicago, that function needs to be different than when they call in from Los Angeles. It needs to recognize different names, it needs to have different options, it needs to run under different hours. So part of the advantage of using speech recognition in the existing CX automated attendant infrastructure is you get to leverage all those things we've always had in terms of flexibility for handling these kinds of groups and locations and special functions. And again, as we talked in the beginning, you also get to use this with whatever you have today. We are completely telephone system agnostic. We're not owned by a manufacturer of a PBX or a network product or anything else, and it's really our goal that all of our functionality is available regardless of the telephone system you have. So where some people will say, oh, if you want some of this nice unified communications, what you need to do, here's a list of all the things you have to yank out and replace. And go to the newer phone system, go to the newer network, go to the newer groupware. That's not the case with ours. Whatever system you have, you can have an old Toshiba key system that we integrate with, and you still get the full set of our functions. We work really hard on that integration piece to make sure that that happens. We have a long history of dealing with customers from the very beginning, where automated attendant wasn't just a menu that was on during the day and off at night kind of thing. So our system is actually capable of unlimited menus and unlimited scheduling. So if you have a CX system and it's covering 9 states and 3 time zones, and you have 42 different departments that open and stop at different times, and they all want different greetings and different functions, that is no problem at all. It truly is unlimited. And that includes not only multiple time zones, but different kinds of routing, different holiday schedules, and everything you can think of can easily be taken care of. Even the need to override something, if the administrator rolls out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning in Chicago and there's now 3 feet of snow on the ground, you have a different set of menus you use in that, and with speech you actually can go in and simply turn those on over the telephone or of course over the mobile device as well. So very, very flexible automated attendant. And then within that, we start using speech recognition. Now our speech recognition platform is just software. Like almost everything we have is just additional software that runs on our server. And in this case, we're using the Nuance speech recognition engine. That's recognized as by far the best server-based recognition engine that you can use out there. So they provide that core engine. They don't write any of the application. That's all us. But we use their engine because they do such a good job. And then we now get to take that application and start breaking it out into different functions. So we do have a user speech directory. That's sort of the starting point for a speech automated attendant, and that means we can prompt something like, please say the first and last name of the person you're trying to reach. And then we'll look in that directory and we'll be able to figure out who they are. Now, unlike most systems where they would just transfer it to your desk, we now kick in our context-based routing engine. So you'll have rules that say maybe it goes to your desk, maybe it goes to your mobile device, maybe it goes to your soft phone at home, all of that routing that we have, and that's a whole nother webinar, but that is integrated with the speech directory. And that's one of the things that makes our product so strong, are all these features we have are not just separate bolt-on servers, they're more functionality within the core application. As soon as you start dealing with rolling out a speech automated attendant, you find out that not everyone has a name that either looks the way it sounds or is actually going to be pronounced by the same way by everyone. And one of the easy ones to understand with this is somebody with an honorific, like a doctor. Somebody might, when they ask for somebody, they might say Dr. Johnson, or they might say Robert Johnson or Dr. Robert Johnson. And that need for alias names is very strong. And we support unlimited alias names, and you can have an alias names table that you maintain outside, like in a spreadsheet, to make it easy to extract and manipulate, and then you can import that information anytime you need into CX. The next thing you notice is there are multiple people with the same name. You need something that's called disambiguation, and that's a core part of our product, and we can disambiguate in a number of different ways depending on what we're trying to do, maybe by location, maybe by department name. So if somebody calls in and it says, please say the first and last name of the person you're trying to reach, you say John Tyler, and it will come back and say, do you mean John Tyler in accounting or John Tyler in operations? So that ability to make the experience for the outside caller intuitive and quick, so they don't feel like they've been, shorted on service, but indeed they're getting through probably faster. That's a very important piece in both designing a product and how you roll it out. And then within that, we also understand that people add names and take out names, and we have an API that will let us synchronize with some other directory besides just our directory. We can actually go in and bring the other information in and put it into our directory. Besides, say the name and transfer, we have departmental transfers. So you can say something like, welcome to AVST, please say the first and last name of the person you're trying to reach, or say the department name. And then the departments are the same thing with aliases, right? They could say accounting, billing, collections, and all of those would do the same thing, and you can set it up. So every command we have in our menus can be speech supported. So when you roll this out, it can be DTMF only, it can be speech only, it can be a mix of DTMF and speech. Any way that you feel best suits your needs and best services your customers. So let's take a look here at something real simple. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a session, and you can listen to what a speech automated attendant sounds like.
At any time during this greeting, you can simply say the name of the person or the department you want to reach. For a list of departments, please say options.
John Tyler.
Who's calling, please?
Mark Reed.
One moment, please.
So that's actually just a brief recorded session off one of our systems. And the prompts, basically are the system speaking to the caller, and then the caller speaking, and that's being recognized. And the way this works is we have the prompts, plus you can record your own prompts. That's actually our canned prompt, the very first one there at any time during this greeting. Most companies actually record their own. It's in kind of, a company voice. It's everything on the system. And then the person says, John Tyler. Now the question is, how did we recognize John Tyler? And that comes down to how speech actually works. It is not, as I said, a conversation with a computer. It's really no different than a Windows screen app, where if you click on a button, it goes and does that thing it's supposed to do based on how they wrote that program. And with speech, if you say the right word or phrase, then it'll go and do the thing you want it to do. If you say something that's not the right phrase, then it's like clicking somewhere else on the screen with a button. It's not going to work. So the design of these systems is very important. At any point in a speech application, there is an associated grammar. And the grammar is the list of all the things that get recognized right here in this part of the application. And that grammar gets compiled and sent up to the nuance server in this case, so John Tyler's name will be recognized. If I add a new user to the system, that new grammar gets compiled dynamically, automatically. You don't have to do anything to do it. Within just a few seconds, that's now part of that grammar. The trick to building a successful speech application is in the grammar. You want the grammar to be as broad as it can, to recognize as many things the customer will say, but also not so broad that you get a lot of misrecognitions. The broader you make the grammar, if you put 50 commands in instead of 3, then maybe there'll be the occasional person that says that as one of those commands and gets service correctly, but more likely callers are going to get a confused response, because when you start putting that many commands in, they start to sound like each other to the engine. So one of the things we bring to the table is a 20-year history of understanding how to build and maintain speech grammars. That's a major difference in our product compared to most of the other products you're going to find on the market. So the outside caller interface I said earlier is what happens after the user calls in. So I call in and I ask for John Tyler, and it rings in his phone, and he doesn't answer, so it takes it and it puts it into his voicemail. I leave a message, and then I come back. I'm still on the system because I left him a message. Now I want to do something else. And our outside caller interface is also speech-driven, and no one else's is, by the way. So what happens with the outside caller interface is when this comes back, instead of just going straight into the mailbox and leaving a message, although you can set it up that way, the system comes back still using speech because that's what the caller is used to. The caller was speaking to the system up front. They're not expecting now to have to press keys. And particularly if they're driving in the car and they got this far, to ask them to get their phone out of their pocket and press 7, not a very reasonable thing to do. So we also have the outside caller interface, which will go ahead and come back and say, John Tyler is not available. Please say locate, leave a message, try another person or operator. So a full range of other options. But the important thing from this presentation's point of view is it's speech from beginning to end. And you've all probably had that frustration of, calling on your Bluetooth speakerphone and getting a speech front end and transferring to someone, and then having to use DTMF to finish the call or to do whatever's next. We made a point of making sure our system was safe as well as just much more friendly to the callers. So if we leave the speech automated attendant, we sort of go to the second main piece, that's the user interface. Again, our user interface, the magic in our user interface, and this is another 20 years in the making, understanding what people want to say, what we can support, how we limit it so it's very, very accurate, but how we still let it be intuitive. Because people think as soon as speech is involved that they're talking with somebody else with a brain, that if they go, listen, I need to, oh, wait a minute, who is that guy? Oh, yeah, John. Yeah, I need to talk to John. That doesn't work in a speech recognition system. Humans have no problem with that at all. Speech recognition systems, they tend to be a little more literal. So what do we do in our speech-enabled personal assistant? Certainly everything we do in our DTMF assistant and plenty more. So what can you do? You can go in and get your messages. And that's probably one of the things most of us do in the morning when we're driving into work. We call in, and it says, hello, Neil Butler, what would you like to do? And I say, get new messages. I'm doing that triage that people normally have to wait to do until they get to work. I'm doing it all there. Hands-free, nice and safe, and very big boost in productivity for people who spend a lot of time in the cars. But besides just getting messages, I can send messages. I can make phone calls. I can answer incoming calls. So if I'm in listening to my message and a call comes in, I'll get a beep in my ear and it says, you have a call from John Tyler. Please say accept, reject, acknowledge. I have all that functionality while I'm in my mailbox, all speech-driven. The basic commands like get messages, get new email are very, very intuitive. And then there's sort of a second level of commands that people will pick up as they go along. Having speech also does something sort of magic, which is let us increase the user base, who I can communicate with from just those people on my system, because I have that compiled grammar with their names in it, to anyone in my contacts. Because we will actually pull down a user's contacts and put that in the grammar as well. So I now can make a phone call to somebody in my contacts by just saying, call John Tyler. I can send a new message out to people and include a new message going out to somebody else in my contacts. And they're actually getting an email message with a WAV file attachment. I can read my calendar. I can make new appointments on my calendar. I can make new appointments on my calendar and invite someone who's in my contacts, who's not even a member of my system. So all of that functionality that's grown over the years, totally speech-driven, and it's all about turning non-productive time, in a car primarily, into productive time. So here's just kind of what a sample session of messaging sounds like.
What would you like to do?
Get new messages.
One moment, please. You have 3 unread messages. Message number 1, an email message from Mark Reed. Message subject, the Martin Project. Message body, hi John, we need to talk about the Martin Project. Call me as soon as you can.
So that's an example of getting messages, and in that case, I did an email message. So you could also hear the ability using text-to-speech to have your email messages read to you over the phone. So the ability for me when I'm driving into work in the morning to go through and do a triage of my mailbox and listen to all my voicemails, listen to all my emails, reply to them. So I could listen to this message and it says, John, we need to talk, and I could say, reply to this message. It would come back and say, record your message. I'd say, yeah, listen, I'm going to go ahead, and when I get to work, I'll set up a meeting, and I'll send you a copy of that meeting request. Thanks. And what Mark gets is an email reply back with my voice comments as a WAV file attachment. So the ability to extend the communications world out to my contacts is one of the key pieces that makes it such a powerful tool that gives people so much better productivity. I also can take incoming calls. Now this is kind of unusual, and one of the two pieces I think that people find the most helpful, the more you spend on the road, the more helpful you find this, is the ability from the voice interface, which we're going to look at now, to kind of do the screen callings, or the call screenings, such that you can figure out who's calling you and what they want sort of before you commit to the call. And then we do the same thing from our mobile client silently for those people who are in meetings. But let's listen now to a kind of a call acknowledgement session.
You have a call from Mark Reed. Please say accept call, reject call, acknowledge, transfer call, or review call.
Acknowledge.
Please record a brief acknowledgement.
Hi, Mark. I'm in a meeting, and we'll call you back when I get out in about an hour. So now what happens there is somebody called me, and I have call screening turned on, and it either asks them to record their name, or in this case, because you heard it with text-to-speech, it's somebody from a user from the system. So it tells me who's calling, and then I have choices. Accept call will obviously transfer the call to me. Reject call will send them to voicemail. Acknowledge, which we just looked at, will let me actually record a personal message to that caller, generally giving a callback expectation. Transfer would let me transfer that call to somebody else on my system. So if I know that Mark is working with me and Dick Reddy, one of my other sales engineers, and I know I'm going to be busy now for a couple of hours, I could transfer that call. Or if I'm walking down the hall when I answer this on my mobile phone, I could transfer that call to my desk phone with fixed mobile convergence, because I don't really want to sit in my office, you know, with the mobile phone up to my ear for that long. So speech is really a very powerful tool. The calendar piece in particular, depending, I guess, on how much you use your calendar, turns out to be something that I go to several times a day. I'm not one of the people that makes a lot of appointments over the phone, because most of my appointments I'm responding to. I'm being asked to join. So what this means is during the course of the day, I can listen to my calendar appointments. I can listen to requests. If somebody says, hey, can you join me on a meeting next Thursday at 2? I can just say, get my appointments for next Thursday, and it'll come back and tell me what's there. And then if I want, I can create an appointment, or I can go back to the message, reply to that person, and let them do that as well. So the ability to link to your groupware calendar with a speech interface, very, very powerful tool for people who spend their lives basically living in their calendar. Now this slide is interesting. I don't ever play the audio on this one, because this is not really what you would do. You'd be very unlikely to go in and ask for the email address for somebody through this. But this is just showing you that we have access to your contacts. So if you have the personal assistant license and you're using speech, then we're going to automatically sync your contacts entries into the system. And while I would almost never ask for the address, I can now send a message. I can be driving down the road and realize, oh, I need Mark to be ready for our meeting today. I need to make sure he has a projector for us. And you can say, send a message, record your message. Yeah, Mark, listen, for that meeting today at 2, make sure you have a projector for the screen, because we're going to want to show the new application. And he's now going to get an email message with a voice wave attachment. So I can call people, I can send messages to people, I can forward messages to people, and I can invite them to calendar meetings. So having access to that context for most of us makes the tool much more useful. So if you look at how people deploy this, our system has so many different pieces that every customer sort of puts it together in their own way, depending on what their needs are. And so we always like to, for these kind of solutions, include at least one kind of customer testimonial. And in this case, we're looking at Navy Pier in Chicago. because it's kind of a little unusual. It's not your basic, everybody sitting in a cubicle kind of business. These people are obviously managing this attraction, and they've got a very flexible workforce that's out and about all the time, and so they're using all sorts of different pieces of our product. On the speech side, this is maintained such that there's a number for Navy Peer you call, and of course, you want to get in touch with somebody. Now, this isn't just a let me call Bob kind of thing. This is, I need to be able to ask for businesses and by categories as well, and there's things I need to do. I need to be able to find an employee who's not at a desk but who's out and about somewhere. So I need the automated attendant plus the context-based routing. And I really need this all to work fairly flawlessly for a calling public that's not been trained. These aren't regular business people that call me every day. These are occasionally one-time callers, and that's very, very important. So a lot of you probably have a CX system. We get a lot of our existing customers on these webinars, and if you do, you've got a lot of the pieces in place already to deploy the speech applications. The automated attendant is all there, and all the advanced scheduling is all there. Now all you really need to deploy speech, there's not a new server, there's not let's put a new speech server application in like the competition does. This is just licensing to turn on the speech, add the speech recognition resources from Nuance to that system, which you get through us, and once you've added those licenses, they are a common pool of licenses. So if you want your users to have access and you also want automated attendant, then we sit down and say, well, how many calls at once are going to need speech, and you start rolling it out. Now this is kind of the place where I talk about how you roll this out. Some people, they say, you know what, I have a 48-port system and it only makes sense to me for my automated attendant to be speech and all my users to have speech. I'm going to add 48 speech resources and turn it all on. And that works fantastic. We're happy to do that. Other people say, you know, I'm really only interested in the speech automated attendant. I have a 12-port hunt group for my automated attendant, so I'm just going to get 12 ASR resources and run that, and then I'm not going to turn speech on for the users. There's no license for the users. Once you have the speech resources, you can simply turn it on for any mailbox, but they will be using a resource. So if you want to have some users plus some speech rec automated attendant, then we need to sit down and figure out how to traffic this stuff. When I deal with a customer who's in the stages of first buying a CXE system, I always recommend they buy one ASR resource. Not to do any real applications with it, but with one, they can now start the process of seeing how this works. They can build a test menu and go in there and try it out and see how that seems to work in their environment. They can have a user spend a week with the speech interface and see if they really think that the value is there. But I'm also a little sneaky because when they buy one, immediately somebody uses that one and suddenly they're calling and saying, well, that one's always in use. And the answer, of course, is to buy two. So this is one of those cases where your first drink is free. In almost every case, people end up buying more. Not everybody completely deploys speech on their system. There's really, you know, in a lot of cases, no reason to do that. But we love to have those conversations about just what you think would be helpful, and we can start them now because we can go to our questions page.
All right. Thank you so much, Neil. There are a handful of questions already in the queue. If you'd like to submit a question and you haven't already done that, go ahead and use the orange arrow in the upper corner of your screen if you have it minimized, and then you should see the question box toward the bottom of the panel there. So, Neil, the first question, does AVST or the reseller partner help with the speech setup, such as disambiguation?
So I can't talk for the partners directly, although I will say any of them that have experience doing this will have a method that involves some meetings up front to talk about what your expectations are, and then let us see your user directory. Let us talk about, you know, not only disambiguation, but nicknames and pronunciation of names that are different. So definitely our professional services, that'll be a part of anything we do with speech. It'll all get sorted out in the end, because what'll happen is somebody with a strange name will come and complain, and then you'll go in and put the alias in. But it's a much better experience, not only for your users, but for the calling public, if you do that sort of work up front.
Okay. Next question, how about user training for speech interface? We are concerned about users not embracing speech.
Well, there's a couple of topics in there, I guess, that I can break it down into. User training, we see very little user training. Typically what people do is send out the card that shows all the common commands and tell people that, you know, it's going to go on, we're going to turn it on next Monday, but at any time you can dial #1 to go back to the old interface. And people will call in and play with it, and there'll be almost no pushback at all. It's just so easy to use. If you want training, then you know, that can certainly be set up to be done by the vendor or by our professional services people, but it's not really very effective to get a bunch of people in a room and simply, you know, tell them the speech command. We have had people put like 4 phones in a break room, you know, a week before it's going to go online, and offer users the chance, and each one of those phones has a different mailbox that they can just call in and play with. That's one of the ways we've seen it. But the speech is intuitive enough that most customers, if we send them the user guide, the speech card user guide, they look at that and say, oh yeah, we'll be okay with that.
Okay, follow-on question, similar topic. What are the key factors you've seen driving adoption of utilizing speech commands?
I really can't say enough about the planning up front in terms of working with somebody that understands all these things, and that can be your vendor or that can be our professional services people, and doing the table of all the alias names and looking at how you use groups for disambiguation and understanding the menus, what you're presenting in the menus. Years ago, you know, people had to learn how to use DTMF menus. They had to learn things like, don't say the digit first. Don't say press 1 for sales and 2 for operations. Because what happens, people are listening to it and they suddenly hear operations and they forgot what that digit was. So we learned to say, for sales, press 1. For operations, press 2. There's that same kind of tribal knowledge for setting up a speech automated attendant in terms of what you say, what options come first. Do you have a second level menu? I don't know if you noticed, but on that example I gave, you know, there was a second menu. If, you know, for the departments, press 2 or say options. It was that kind of thing, because you can't put all that information in a menu. You need to kind of, you know, do that 80-20 rule. Get 80% of those calls handled right there with those first couple of commands, and then figure out the correct strategy for handling the rest. But anyone who deploys this experience will talk you through that process.
Okay, next. Can the caller still press 0 or say 0 for the receptionist?
Yes, unless you somehow manage to turn that off. We do some interesting things with 0. We can be set up so that 0 works anywhere, but it works differently. So if you're in the main day greeting and press 0, it'll go where it says, like transfer to the attendant. If you're listening to my personal greeting and press 0, it might go to me or to the sales engineering admin person. So we can set it up so that when you enter the system and press 0, anytime during that call, it follows what's programmed in that mailbox. So if you come in to the system in Chicago, when you press 0 at any time, it's going to go to the Chicago receptionist, where if you come into the system at LA. You know, fighting that battle of voicemail jail is, you know, how we've lived our lives over the last 30 years. So 0 is, you know, completely mappable every place in our application.
Okay, next question. Can a voicemail be converted to text and delivered as an SMS text message?
Yes, we have an optional application that does that. And you can actually do true SMS if you want, or you can just use SMTP regular email to relay it to the phones. All of the phone vendors accept SMTP messages and then send them on to the phones. And that is a subscription service you can get from us, where basically, you know, you don't necessarily want to put all your users on it, maybe 50 users on it. You buy a yearly license, and then that all happens. We offer both cloud-based service, where it's sent to the cloud and transcribed and returned to your email, and the ability to put the servers that do the transcription on site. So again, discussion we're happy to have with you.
Okay, next question. Do you have tools to export or import directory information from an existing system?
Yes. I'd say the standard process is we will go to your existing voicemail system and talk you through the process of extracting a user directory that not only has the username, but maybe their mobile phone number and class of service information and all these other pieces. That goes into typically a spreadsheet. It gets massaged a little, and then that comma-separated file that we save is used to create all the subscriber mailboxes on the system in the beginning. For those of you that add a lot of users seasonally, or those of you that make sweeping program changes every now and then, you can do that same process by doing it in a spreadsheet and doing the import, as opposed to having to go to each screen and type everything in.
Okay, thanks, Neil. It looks like that wraps up the question time. Just want to wrap things up here and just give one more reminder that we will send you a copy of these slides and a copy or a link to view the recording in case you want to review any of this content. That will go out later today. And just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us, and I'll let Neil wrap us up.
Thank you, Ann. And thanks everybody again for attending. Hopefully you find these useful. We would certainly find it useful for you to let us know. So please send us your feedback at info@avst.com. Let us know there's other webinars you'd like to see us run, or you'd like to see us change the way we do the ones we do. This is really all about us having a chance to give you the information that you need to successfully maintain your business.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.